Hey there, folks. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from, of course, the Philanthropy Mastermind series. So sorry to keep you waiting by just a little minute today, but hopefully that just means your anticipation is increased for this conversation we're going to have today with Anne Murphy. And you've already seen, I'm sure, that Anna's not only waving, but also she's been in the chat where I hope you will be. You saw that in the slides that we had, that Jack, our producer, had set up as our counter today. And we really do want to engage with you. So that can be in a couple of ways. Of course, the chat and the Q&A, all three of us will be paying attention to all of that. So please don't be shy. Whether you want to announce yourself or do it anonymously, we really do want to have you as a part of this conversation. So maybe as a way to warm that up, you can join Anne and just say hello and maybe where you're from, which part of the country or the world, and which organization. We would love that. So please do warm up that space for us if you would. And meanwhile, I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I want to and thank you for starting, you guys. I really, really do appreciate you doing that. Thank you, Mike. And I'm looking at this from across the room, but I see Lawrence here. Well, great. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Good to see you too. And everybody who's in there in the chat, we love that. We really do. This session, of course, is brought to you, as all of our sessions are, by the folks at DonorSearch. And we won't be talking about them unless Anne mentions them for some reason today. But you can learn all about them and, not coincidentally, all about the people who really love you and your mission, your donors, over at DonorSearch.net under the Resources tab. Also, you will find information about the Mastermind series. So if you're not already on our list, where we've had a good number of sessions on AI, by the way, you can find out all about those, both past and future, under the Resources tab. And while you're there, again, you can learn all about DonorSearch's work in helping us to be better at building the relationships that really matter and drive our institutions to create change in the communities where we live. And additionally, we are often asked if this is recorded, and this is. So this will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Please be on the lookout for an email from us in 24 to 48 hours afterwards with a link to this recording so you can share it with colleagues and friends. But please do stick around because the conversation is really built around you. So I'll be asking some questions and I'll be talking and sharing, but please do be a part of that. And now I'd like to take a minute to just introduce Anne to you. If you're not familiar with Anne and her work, Anne Murphy is, of course, the founder and CEO, as you just saw, of Empowered Fundraiser. She's been in the field for over 25 years, and that includes a big stint of time, of course, at I always mix up the acronym, but Oregon State University Foundation, and additionally at UCSF, at Ohio University, et cetera, in leadership roles, often as director of development or higher in schools of business, engineering, et cetera, where she has been working to make sure that the departments work very well and seamlessly. And she brings that same spirit and expertise to her work with her firm, Empowered Fundraiser. So there, she's empowering development offices to raise more money without all those years of trial and error. And if ever that was important, it's in the world of applying AI to our work, since there's a fundamental issue, as you saw in our title today, of trust. And that is, here's this new thing. Most people don't really know what it is or where it comes from, and we're suddenly expecting them to use it and to join with us in doing so. This is exactly why Anne is here today to help us figure out how to make that work. So Anne, thank you very much for hanging out today and talking. And I know that you're on mute, so here you go.
Thanks for having me, Jay. And thanks, Jack, for supporting us in the background. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, I love to tip-tap with you all during the session, but I just realized for some Zoomy reason, you're not able to see my chats, but I left some really good stuff in there. But my business partner is on, and he's going to drop like my LinkedIn URL so we can connect. I'm so delighted to be here, and I want to begin by just also acknowledging how grateful I am that all of you are here, because I believe that our industry, more than most, is an example of the rising tide lifting all boats, and that as AI becomes just ubiquitous, those of us who are on the call today, we're going to be the fifth graders to the fourth graders, right? And that's all we need to be. We need to be able to talk a little bit knowledgeably to one another and to our stakeholders. It's not expected that we're going to be experts. There are no experts in this AI landscape. So kudos to you for being here, and we promise to give you some good takeaways that will help you do your job better and also help you communicate with your stakeholders to build trust, which is our currency.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree that you're not an expert, but I'll accept the rest of what you said. And I definitely love the idea that you framed this around trust, because what's the expression that Paul Edwards and other people use, which is that philanthropy moves at the speed of trust. And so if there isn't a lot of trust in this, in AI, then we've got a real problem. But you framed that with that great title. Can you talk a little bit about why this is an issue at all? I mean, is there an issue of trust with AI? I shouldn't assume anything. Talk about that.
I believe there are some really profound issues with trust in AI, and not just that we're at the crossroads where we can build the trust or deteriorate the trust, right, with other people, with our stakeholders, but like I've had these experiences since getting into the generative AI field where I haven't felt like I trusted what reality was. I haven't felt like I understood like what I've been doing with my life up until now, and that I can trust what's going to happen in the future. I mean, trust in general right now is wobbly, right? We're entering into the election season, and we've already had numerous examples of deep fakes. And we know, they're affecting all of us. I'm going to close my door real quick. They're affecting everyone, so much so that I'm just going to put in a little PSA about something we did with our family. We have a code word in our family now. If I were to get a call and somebody was to say, can you come bail me out of jail? This is your son. It sounds exactly like my son. I would say, what is the family code word? Because the deep fakes, they are us. There are sounds, there are our likenesses. And so we're entering into this season where it's not just about our stakeholders' trust. It's also about our trust in our own reality, our own understanding, our own sense of our personal history and what the future looks like.
Yeah, that's very clever about the code word. I hadn't heard people talk about that before, and that's much like a passcode or anything else on anything we use. Makes infinite sense. For people who may not have heard these stories, can you share maybe one of those stories about these deep fakes, whether they're auditory or whether they're video, and whether it's political or it's even in fundraising? If you've heard about that yet, I haven't, but maybe you have.
So, there've been a couple of examples of people using celebrities' likenesses in a video selling stuff. So I just saw one, there was one with Taylor Swift and some pots and pans, and now they put Selena Gomez. Same video, same product. They just swapped her out for Selena Gomez.
Wow.
Rest assured, Selena Gomez is not selling pots and pans that you have to buy by midnight tonight, right? I have a video of that I made in literally 5 minutes of myself talking, and it doesn't sound like me. Like Ann Kulikowski, who's on here, she's seen it. It doesn't sound like me, but it is, you can see it's directionally accurate, right? It just sounds a little bit of uncanny valley. No big deal. Soon it's going to be there. And some of like our favorite podcasters, they are recording their podcast sessions, but with any of the readily available technology ahead of time, and we don't even know it. We would have no way of knowing. It's indistinguishable. There was the case a couple weeks ago with Joe Biden. They used Joe Biden's voice, robocallers telling them not to vote. See, it's going to be everywhere. And I think, with regard to fundraising, I don't have any extreme stories, but what I do have, and this will kind of dip into sort of like just the more regular run, day-to-day examples of trust building. An example of a donor wondering who wrote this letter. So there are a lot of things that we do in fundraising that are important because they are ceremonial. They're important because somebody put a lot of thought into it, because they spent a lot of time on it. Think about a case statement. A case statement is not important because of the word hot take, not important because of the words on the page at this point in our lives. They're important because of the process that we went through. They're important because we brought the board together and had a subcommittee, and we tested the ideas, and we had, focus groups, and, we built a framework for collaboration, and we interviewed important people. That's where the real impact of a case statement is. If you say it's just about the written word, well, I'll be right back. I can write your case statement in 5 minutes, right? So there are things where a donor may be thinking, oh, they at least spent some time and creativity on this. I know the president didn't actually write this letter, but somebody they hired did, right? Or, somebody sat down and, had their pen and pencil, and they thought about it, and they came up with this narrative for this letter. Well, now they could be thinking, I got this lovely letter, but no one cares. No one wrote it. They just press a button. They're lazy. And part of this is just because people won't understand for a really long time how the generative AI actually works. So again, it's a pedestrian example, but it's what I just had a conversation yesterday with AFP about. What if our donors don't think that we care about them because we don't spend the same amount of time doing the things that we usually would spend on, like stewardship?
Yeah, this is interesting because I know we're going to talk about a lot of things. I didn't know we were going to talk about donor perception, about the amount of effort that we personally are investing in things. And the reality of, let's use case statements as an example, is that often now we will go, and I've done this. I've taken material to draft a case statement, and I've, utilized things that I could expose to an open platform like ChatGPT, and I've used that to generate an initial draft. I would never use that as a final draft because frankly, I don't find the pros, no matter what I am submitting and no matter what the form of my prompt, is not going to be in my voice or my client's voices. But it does accelerate the process.
Mm-hmm.
And but what you just said is so interesting, which is that donors, or anybody we're talking to, anybody in our constituency, anybody who cares about our mission, might expect that we put in some sweat and tears.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been hearing that also from supporters? I mean, and do you have that sense yourself? Do you feel like when you get something, somebody should have really sweated that out and made those words mean something to them?
So I do not. I kind of come from a different point of view for myself personally, but also want to reframe it for others, which is, I do think there's a fair amount of what we do is meaningful because it's ceremonial and because we take a lot of time on it. In many cases, I feel that that's true. For a lot of our donors, though, particularly as I think about the composition of our boards, their organizations are not going to be doing things the long way on purpose. They're going to be looking to us to say, are you a well-run business? If so, you ought to be using generative AI, because we're going through the growing pains, but we're also seeing the cost containment. We're seeing the increase in employee engagement. We're seeing the increase in revenue. We're doing it. Now I expect you to. So that's the other side of the trust. It's like, okay, maybe it feels like we're shaving off a little bit of the personalization. I suppose you could go down that route. But on the other hand, if we're using ubiquitous technology and we're using it responsibly to run a well-run business, then we are securing their trust. And I think this gets at, like when I was thinking about stakeholders, Jay, I was thinking about specifically donors, employees, nonprofit staff, and higher ed staff and our industry as a whole. So industry, donors, and staff. The industry component, I think that this will help us. I hope. Sometimes I can be so painfully naive and optimistic, but I hope that this is one of the ways that we can chip away at the overhead myth. So as nonprofits, as we are out here, even before many other industries are, talking about AI governance, talking about upskilling, right? Have the framework toward responsible AI in fundraising, for example. And Donnie, can you drop fundraising.ai in the chat for folks? Or somebody, I just know he does it all the time for me. They're going to see that we are out in front here saying, we don't have our heads in the sand. We're not over here on the sideline. We are in it. We are guiding it. We're not waiting to be guided by, big tech, for example. We're making our own rules that factor in the trust of all of our stakeholders. I think that is, the stakeholder, the overhead myth comes from so many different directions, and none of us know how we're ever going to solve it. But this is one way that we can say, in fact, actually, we're using generative AI, and it's not that we are paring down on our workforce. It's that we're recalibrating what people do with their time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a whole host of expectations out there, and they're not always, are they always very informed expectations about, about this stuff, about both what AI is and does, but also what we do and do not do?
Oh, yes. I mean, yeah. Both. I think there's a general societal misunderstanding about what we do for a living, what nonprofits do and how they manage money. They'll put that's a whole world over there. With regard to how AI is used, I think that we are going to it's a very, very long term question about how it's being used, how it can be used to its best, because as every day brings more technology that's changing the people, process, and culture within our organizations, it's the goalpost getting moved out every day. Last week I had a complete AI meltdown. I spend so much time in this world, and I have given myself like a self-guided PhD, and I sometimes think that should mean that I know what the heck is going on. And last week, so many things happened in the generative AI landscape, and I just lost my bearing. I was like, I cannot figure out what is going on. It's a very human reaction, and lots of people are living in this space too.
It's almost like our GPS is broken, but we're driving on the
Yeah,
highway
you're
at the
like,
same speed.
yes, exactly.
So talk about some of those changes. I mean, just some of the ones that you were buffeted by, because not everybody's following it like you are. What are some of the things that have come along?
Well, let me start at the beginning a little bit. Because here's what I learned last week is that it's always a good time to go back to the basics. And last week, there was just too many new applications, too many announcements of new technology and new platforms and changes in leadership and just a swirl of things. And then I thought about it and I centered myself. I thought, which of these things applies to my life right now, right? And that's what I would recommend to folks on the call and who are watching it now or later. Start with what matters right now. Start by making yourself a list of what are the things that take joy away from how I show up in the world every day, particularly at work? What are those things that are keeping me from working in my zone of genius, right? Make a laundry list of them. Then make a laundry list of the things that you love to do. And then when you start going through your day, you look at, okay, well, one of the things that I absolutely just do not enjoy doing is writing, the same, more or less the same creative brief that needs to go up through 6 layers of, of approval and delays my event or delays the production of my impact report. And I cannot keep doing this. Well, we can use generative AI to create something that's very easy to approve, that won't take quite that long. And so now you can maybe spend time on more of the interesting aspects of planning an event or the human aspects of planning an event. So tons of new platforms, changes in leadership at the top. I'll give a specific example of a new technology that people are really excited about and kind of where I went with it in my mind. So Sora is a new product by OpenAI, and it's really, I mean, it's face-meltingly remarkable. You, while you type, it creates the movie, and the movie is not some like janky, pixelated, like wannabe movie. It is, I mean, it is gorgeous. Everything about it is perfect, and you're typing. You might like, now there's a turtle, now there's a rainbow, now we're in a jungle, now we're on a mountain, and the movie is changing. And there's a lot about that that's very, very exciting. And like, we can do a lot of new things with it. And there's a lot that's scary about it. But I thought about it, I was like, Jay, like, how does that impact my life today? I don't have a use case for Sora. So I'm not sitting here on the edge of my seat waiting for it to be available to the whole entire public, because I'm using ChatGPT. I'm using Claude. I'm using Perplexity. I'm using like 3 or 5 tools 100 times a day. When I need to know Sora, I'll work that in, but I don't need to know it. And that's what I would recommend to folks who are like, where do I start? Start with, I need help writing an invitation for a luncheon. I need help with a new way to say thank you, because for 25 years, I've had to say thank you and try to come up with new ways to say thank you. There are only a few different ways to say thank you. Ask ChatGPT to help you. So the basics, going back to the basics.
Yeah. For those who have not seen Sora, there's a whole Sora page over at OpenAI with demo examples, and it is pretty remarkable because they look very real, and it's not like things before, which I guess brings us back to this issue about picking the things that enable us to do what's best. I went to the session at the Giving Institute a few days ago, and I'm going to refer to this so I don't forget the gentleman's name, because he's the outgoing president emeritus at University of Florida Foundation. That's Tom Mitchell. And one of the things he said in his very direct, straightforward talk was that he's learned, he talked about tools and using consultants and about the value of that and so forth. But he didn't talk specifically about AI, but he said something I think applies to using services, using people on the outside to help amplify what you do or improve it, but also to using tools like AI, which is, he said, you should only do what only you can do. Just do what only you can do. Not because there aren't other people with talent, but if you're in that place at that time, that's the talent you want to bring to this task, to this effort, to this place, to this mission. And that would seem to apply to what you're saying, at least in my mind, which is, there may be 1,000 AI tools right now, and tomorrow they're going to be another 1,000, but that doesn't mean that they're all applicable to what it is that you can do.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It doesn't, you don't need, and also just because you can doesn't mean you need to, or you should necessarily. Like,
right.
Don't get me wrong though. I have stayed up wee hours, making this, that, or the other AI cool thing just because it's so much fun. And it is super seductive, and you want to be doing the next thing and the next thing. But yeah, do what you can, do what makes sense. And then also think about how you can use generative AI to allow you to do what only you can do. So one of the things that fundraisers can do that not everyone else can do is spend time getting to know people and families, being a person who they can trust with their hopes and their dreams and their fears, their concerns, what they've tried to fix their concerns, what hasn't worked, what they hope their legacy is, the challenges that they have like within their family, with their pets, with their health. That's something that development officers are uniquely positioned to be able to do. And also, from the vast majority of development officers, that is a small portion of their time, right? It's ideally, it would be a huge portion of our time, but our jobs include so many other things. So if you start looking at your to-do list and thinking about what's something that's on here that a lot of different people could do, it's possible that generative AI can do it. Like, some of the more repetitive or like, menial things that we do all day, every day. Can I give an example, Jay?
Please. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give an example, and this does relate to stakeholder trust. And I think you'll see in a variety of areas through this example. So this is I'm going to describe a workflow from the point of preparing for a donor visit all the way to the follow-up email. So when you're preparing for a donor visit, one of the ways we do that is we go into our CRM and we read up and we see what's been happening. We see what their relationship is with the organization, and we start to try to figure out what this person is like, right? What their inner world might be like, because you're planning for a meaningful conversation. So you're trying to elicit lots of information that might help inform that. But you're also learning about an initiative or where they've given before or where you hope they give. So you've already got a lot of information that you've got to turn into knowledge, right? You got to take this info that is safely living in our CRM, right? Now you're taking it out of the CRM. So now it's not as safe as it was, right? So now we have a confidentiality and data security risk. So stakeholder trust. Donors would reasonably want to know, what are you doing with my data? Okay. No matter whether we use AI or not, we've now taken this out of the CRM. It's probably in a cloud somewhere, but it also could have been printed out. So in this day and age, though, we have some information about the donor, and we don't ever have to put a proper name into ChatGPT. In all of my workshops, everybody puts a pledge into the chat, says, I will not put confidential information into ChatGPT. So just don't ever put confidential information into ChatGPT. And the way that I do that, it's Minnie Mouse, it's Mickey Mouse, and it's Disneyland Enterprises. I don't put the name of a university, name of a nonprofit. I don't put my name, nobody's name. No, just no names, and that's going to cut out a whole big chunk of it. So you're preparing for a donor visit, and now you put some information in ChatGPT about Minnie Mouse likes this. The program that I'm talking to her about is a STEM camp for girls because they're going to go study how roller coasters work. I don't know. We can do a lot with generative AI to prepare for the visit. We can say, what are some of the questions that Minnie might have about this program? Then we can say, what are some of the objections she might have? So now we're using generative AI to have a deeper, more meaningful conversation with Minnie, or maybe we're going to be able to get to the important part of our meeting instead of 45 minutes in, maybe it's 20 minutes in, where we see, okay, we're getting to the meat of it right now. What questions might I need to ask Minnie? This is the kind of stuff that without a mentor and lots of conferences, a lot of development officers don't know this stuff. So you can prepare, you can do all the things, you do the visit. I'm fast forwarding now to the visit's over. And one of the things that I like to do that will allow me to have more time with donors is to take that follow-up work and make it smoother and easier and more replicable. So day in, day out, you can do this. So what we do is I use ChatGPT 4, which for anyone who's on the call, please get ChatGPT 4, and I can tell you how you'll make your $20 back. Just DM me. There's like 3 use cases where you'll make all your money back. But ChatGPT 4 and you speak the meeting into your phone. You know, I talked to Minnie, she liked the idea. We talked about a project, 300 to 500,000. It's going to involve some tech firms. She was concerned about, you know, are we really going to be able to pull this off? Blah, blah, blah. Then you have ChatGPT turn that into your contact report. So you need a prompt, and I have a prompt, but you need a prompt, a decent one, doesn't have to be great. And then you take your contact report and you can have it turned into your follow-up email. And the follow-up emails, people's radars go off because they're like, ChatGPT isn't a good enough writer, blah, blah, blah. So a couple things about that, but one is it can be. It is a matter of, you know, you have to coax it, you have to prime it in order to be able to write like you or like your brand or your organization or your CEO. You can get pretty darn close, but it's worth navigating that part, because if you're using a prompt, you're always going to have the same format. You're going to remember to say, my thing that I always would forget is, what's the best way to follow up with you? So I always want to know from the donor, and I want them to know they told me the best way to follow up. Well, that's in my prompt, but it slips my mind every time I go to write one myself. So now I've got the email that has all the things that it needs to have in it. It's not in maybe not in my voice, just a little bit of editing. And then that part of my job is done, because it is the work, but the hour and 45 minutes for that last part, you know, after the visit, the hour and 45 minutes I spend, that's not intellectual property, right? That's just processing information. And so that's why I think if we can responsibly use generative AI, because in this workflow example, there's like 10 areas where you could, you know, do something wrong with the data. You could run into biases, lack of explainability, lack of transparency, lack of compliance. It's just an everyday example. So, but it's a way that it allows us to spend more time doing what we do best, which is being in conversation with donors.
Yeah. Thank you for that example. I know we're talking about, as we think about stakeholders, really three different populations, right? One is organizational, one is staff, and another is the donor population. What you just described there, I guess, at least to my mind, takes us through how someone can operationalize this and look out for the problems. And for people who want to see those areas, I think you said 10 areas where you could really stumble. Do you have a roadmap for that, or something that you are able to share with people?
Well, so what I would do, if you haven't already, I would check out the framework for responsible fundraising, the framework toward responsible AI in fundraising. And there are 8 or 9 pillars in there. And what's comforting when you look at that is like, okay, these are the things that I've been worried about too. These are the things I think my donors are worried about. Okay, we're talking about it. And you'll start to look at like how, like one of them is transparency. So transparency, meaning if my donor were to ask me, did you write this email? I would say, we work with generative AI to produce content. Or I use generative AI as a thought partner. Or it's like, so you take those pillars from that framework and you look at your work in that context and you'll see those little areas. But one area where it's like, really stop and think, because there is, there's some very, very powerful data analysis tools, even in just ChatGPT 4, even in ChatGPT 3.5. Anytime I'm uploading a spreadsheet, it's like, I am so careful, because a spreadsheet is very likely to have it could have information that when you put it together, you can figure out who they're talking
personal
about.
identifying information of some sort. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So spreadsheets are tricky, really tricky. And the goal is, what we're trying to do is, we don't want this information floating around so that the next model, the next version of ChatGPT or Claude or Pi or the two different groks or whatever, will be trained on that data. So you want to keep it out of that, they call it training data. Now, some of these things are just around the corner that they will be confidential, but that's just not the case right now.
Yeah, in fact, just to take a quick pause, I've heard people, service providers and others sometimes talk about closed systems versus what we're discussing here with ChatGPT, even version 4. For those who are not familiar with that, that's open versus closed systems where they at least say that there is a little more confidentiality. Can you shed light on that?
Yeah, I mean, some people, like normal everyday people like me and you, Jay, have servers in their closet so that this information never even actually, like, it's a very, very closed loop. So yeah, the difference is that the information that you're using in the model is staying in a contained, I mean, this is my very lay, friendly, staying contained versus going out into the vast internet to be scooped up for the next model to use as it learns how to talk like humans.
Right. So that's something I guess that people want to interrogate when they talk to potential partners, AI delivery tools, including things that we're all using now, whether it's Zoom. In fact, I haven't seen the thumb come up yet. I'm trying to see if I can activate it, or something like within any of the Microsoft suite.
Yeah.
Obviously, the AI tools there within PowerPoint, almost everything we have now. But so those questions are important for the major providers as well as for fundraising specific providers. And you talked about the framework. The framework is something that people can get through fundraising.ai, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
So
and let me share an idea on this. So I know that from my experience as being, a fundraising staff member for 25 years, even when I was in leadership roles, there was still someone else that I could be waiting for to lead, right? Lead the place, lead an initiative, lead this problem, like you're always, this is an example of when you are the leader. Like, so much of this is all about how we show up and interpret these opportunities and interpret the ethics. If you are wondering who is going to give you governance rules, so like rules and regulations on how your organization can use, how you as a staff member can use generative AI, here's what I would suggest. Maybe bump it up one level, but you may not get what you're needing from that. People, I mean, it is all happening so fast. Here's what I would do. I would take that framework and I would put an appointment on my calendar to say, AI governance study hall. And I'm reading the framework and I'm learning about it. Then the following week, I would bring one of my colleagues. Now we are an AI governance council. Now we have two people in our organization who's paying attention to how we should actually use AI. Meanwhile, everybody else is using ChatGPT at home and they're bringing it on their phone to work. And we have people who are running whole entire businesses using Gen AI on their phone. I have a guy who's launching an app. He only did it by his phone. A guy who's it's bananas. We're doing the stuff on our phone when we're at work, even if it's not on our computers. So be that person in your organization who's saying, okay, I noticed that so-and-so sent that email. It was obvious that it was written by ChatGPT and that they didn't edit it. So we've got at least one person in our organization who just simply doesn't know how to do prompting. And so they're sending out stuff that's not good and it's going to make us all look not good. Be that person. You will make so many friends if you're the person at work who knows about this stuff. Those of us who are around here and who are Gen X may remember, like, remember when Excel came out and there was like only a couple people who knew how to use it, and then like everybody else figured it out, and then there were like people who didn't know how to use it, and the people who didn't know how to use it were like, don't want to do a project with them. Like, I don't want to deal with somebody who doesn't know how to use it because then I'm going to get stuck doing it. It's like that, but like times a million. Where if you're the person who's taking an interest in this and you're the person who's willing to ask the hard questions about, like, what are we doing with our data once it gets out of the CRM? Because it's going to mean people have to do things differently. That's an important role we can all play.
It's interesting as you talk about this and you talk about building a council, which is such a brilliant idea. It sounds like every person in the council, if I'm hearing you right, also has almost equal responsibility, regardless of what their role is, because it's sort of like using Excel or maybe even like driving a car. Imagine if there was no DMV and no licensing, but we were all going to drive places, then we still have to take responsibility not to run into other people or run past a stop sign. So we have to understand what the potential risks and rewards are of driving this
Yes.
vehicle, even if there are no guardrails around it.
Oh my goodness. Perfect. Exactly. Yes. Yes. You don't have to be the DMV. You can be the driver who's a responsible driver. It's a really
Yeah.
good analogy.
Yeah, well, I bet that nobody wants a DMV in each of our offices. So
Yeah, no one wants to be. Ours is
it's
really nice. The people are so kind there. So you can be that kind of DMV.
right. That's right. So that's one version. This AI councils that you talked about. You talked about AI frameworks. I'm wondering if there's a way we can also communicate what we're doing. So as we're doing it, not only individually, like building people together, building these coalitions of being smart about how we do things, but for all the people who are probably not going to do it with us no matter what, like the boards. And so I respect the fact that you kind of lined it up as organizations, staff, and donors, but there are these other players in this mix that are sometimes telling us, you got to go and do that AI thing, whatever that is.
Yes.
But then saying, look, should we be doing it? Aren't those robots going to take over the world and destroy our organization? So what about with them? What do we have to think about them? And if so, how? How do we get them to be our partners in this?
So that is one of the biggest, recommendations, is that something like an AI council would include stakeholders across the board. So for example, you might have somebody who's a 20-something brand new staff member. You might have the CEO. You might have a new board member. You might have the pillar of the board person who's been there for 50 years. The goal would be to get input from a cross section, because everyone's experience is very nuanced, right? And important to the conversation. I do agree that boards are going to be a very important, they're going to be a very important player in this landscape. And you are going to hear stuff like, oh, can you just do some AI stuff? Or, oh, you guys shouldn't do AI stuff, right? And what's problematic is that this is like, they have these feelings at their core. I mean, some of us have core memories of Hollywood and AI being very, very bad. And now we're like, oh, wait, it's good? Wait, what? It's different. So I do think that board members are going to be, that's going to be a constituency that's going to be really important. And for the most part, I believe that they are going to be putting pressure on our organizations to implement responsible AI. I think it's going to be much more on that end of the spectrum, which leads me to something that I've been really grappling with, and I'm not quite sure what the solve is. But in the coming months, our fundraisers, our other frontline people are going to start getting questions when we're out and about how our organization is using generative AI. And the real answer is, I don't know, right? Because nobody knows, because it's happening in little pockets all over the organization. We have to, in a hurry, get some talking points together on what is our point of view? What is our position? What are our values? Don't leave frontline people out hanging, right? Not knowing how to answer a question. It's one thing that they don't know how to answer it for themselves, and that's super stressful. They don't know what their bosses want them to do about this. But it's a whole other thing to have your boots on the ground people out there saying, many times a day, potentially, how we're using it, and not have an answer.
That's a real issue, isn't it? And in fact, you mentioned doing something with AFP right at the beginning of our conversation today, and I don't know where AFP stands on all this, let alone our organizations. Is there something outside of fundraising.ai that is
I
helping
Googled,
guide us?
I put it in Perplexity this morning. I think that okay, see, here we are. I think AFP has a policy of some kind. I only know that because I was trying to look at like different people's governance structures, and I said, why didn't you include AFP? And it said, oh, I'm sorry. And then I saw a link, and then I, you know.
Well, that's maybe a thing we can also put in here. I know that you and I are talking because you have lots to share, but if anyone has a question or a comment on any of this, we would really welcome it. So we're not trying to
Very
pressure you,
much.
but please, and if you, for example, have had contact with an organization and you know whether or not they provide some kind of guidance that you've either found helpful or unhelpful, we'd love to know that. Or if there's something going on in your organization that you're thinking, well, this is something where we really need to discuss it internally. What are the ways we can do it? Or this is the way we did it and it worked well. We'd love to know about any of that. So feel free to put that in here. And as we get through the next 10 minutes or so, and I want to make sure that people also know how they can reach you. Do you mind sharing that right now so that we have that as
Oh, good, John. I'm happy to see that. Yes, so I have a couple of things going on that could be helpful. Every Friday, almost every Friday, unless I'm traveling and like giving a talk at that point in time, I'm on LinkedIn Live at 11 a.m. Pacific, and I teach how to actually use these tools. So this Friday we'll be approaching working with ChatGPT as your mentor, knowing that the mentors are few and far between. So we'll be talking about how do you prepare for a difficult conversation? How do you prepare for a meeting with your boss? Where do you get your, like, what are your talking points about the amazing things you've done recently that nobody knows? Preparing for a donor visit. So every hour I do storytelling or planning a trip, figuring out what to wear. You could take a picture. This is where you get your money back. Take a picture, and John, as soon as you get your ChatGPT 4, take a picture of your closet and say, I'm going to a baby shower, or I'm going to a donor event. I'm going to a donor event, but it's at a sporting, thing. And then afterwards, we're going to a bar. What should I wear? ChatGPT will pick your outfit out for you. So you don't have to go buy something new. So when graduation season comes around, don't buy a new dress. No. Let ChatGPT look at your wardrobe from an objective point of view and tell you what to wear. Or
unless
right,
you have it in your closet, it's going to tell me I need better go out and buy some new clothes.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I don't know how. I mean, you just take it's just this like a little crumb of a shirt, and they'll be like, yellow probably looks good on you. And I'm like, I didn't even know I had a yellow shirt. Oh yeah, sure, have the yellow shirt. Same thing though with your refrigerator and your pantry. So take a picture of your fridge and your pantry and say, what can I make for dinner? Because I don't want to go to the store. And as we all know, groceries are expensive. If you go to the store, you buy a bunch of random stuff, you come home, you don't have anything to eat still. That's how I tell people to get their $20 a month back. When you have food, but you don't know what you're going to make, take a picture and have it do it.
Wow, that's brilliant. And I'll bet it also, if you're trying to eat, let's say more healthfully, or like me, less healthfully, then you can probably take a picture and get that answer too. Jack, no jokes about chicken nuggets.
How to reach me. So Fridays, sorry,
yes.
That was holding. Fridays at 11 a.m. I'm there almost every Friday talking about it. And I have all of the recordings, the decks, and other resources all in a link tree for you. And if my business partner's still on, actually, let me just grab this while I talk, just in case he's not. This has all of our resources for fundraisers who are interested in learning how to use generative AI responsibly. And oh shoot, this isn't going to work on mine. Actually, Jack, in case Donnie's not here, will you repost that?
And I just reposted your LinkedIn.
Oh, thank you. And then Yeah.
And for those who are watching this afterwards, that's Anne with an E.
And with
Uh,
an E.
and you can find her on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So for those LinkedIn Lives on Fridays, thank you.
And our website is empoweredfundraiser.com.
Yes, and we'll make sure to also have that in here. And yes, it looks like we have those links operating in the chat. So thank you for that. And I know that you are trying to make it possible for people to share this information in a more, kind of robust and constructive and dynamic way. So it's
Yeah.
not like here's a document, we're done. This is,
No.
you said this earlier, there's a lot of stuff happening every single week.
Yeah.
How are you helping people prepare for change? Whether it's, again, these buckets of stakeholders, whether the people close right in the middle of the action, who should be there, but sometimes just get befuddled, like you talked about, that 1 week, occasionally I just feel like I'm in a fog, or whether it's people who are benefiting perhaps from the work we do, so they're not as close to it, and they might have the most fear. How do you get people ready, not just for the present, but for the future?
It's like the most important question of all of this is, how are we going to navigate the changes? Because it's going to be so profound, and even small changes can be really hard on us, right? Like, legitimately, it's not us having a toy opinion about something. Things are legitimately destabilizing. And to say help prepare, there are a couple of mindset things that I try to keep in mind. One is a beginner's mindset. Every day, it's like, okay, I'm approaching this as a beginner again. I'm going to continue to learn and do it in public and be embarrassed potentially. But to approach it like the gift it is when we can be vulnerable, and when we can stand up in a room and be like, I don't even know what Claude is. Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know. Like, somebody said natural language processing to me a year ago. And I was in a group of really, really smart tech people. And I was like, what's natural? What's that? You know, it's so fine. No, and look, I'm here to tell about it. Like, no problem. They probably, I don't know what they thought of me, but maybe they thought, I'm so glad she asked, because probably other people in the room also didn't know. So there's the beginner's mindset. Another thing I like to think about is, what a beautiful opportunity for us to break stuff that's already broken. There's a lot in our society that is already not working all that great. So here we are being forced to think again about some of the ways that things have always been done. Those are two important things. And then the third one, the number one ingredient to being successful in learning how to use generative AI and implementing it responsibly in your life. You have to be curious and you have to be resilient, but the number one, the most important thing is community. This is not a fun thing to do by yourself. This is not, I mean, you're going to spend hours, it's 10 hours, it'll take you 10 hours to get really good at using generative AI. That part you can totally do by yourself, or with others, but I say community because it's so important to be able to talk to other people about what they're going through with this world. It's so existential. So my husband and I host a gathering every single Saturday at noon Pacific, and people come in and we talk about AI. It's supposed to go until 2. 3 o'clock will go by, 3:30, 4 o'clock. We have to kick people off because they're saying, I'm frustrated. I'm trying this thing and it's frustrating and it's not working. Well, then 6 other people are saying, oh, me too. I thought there was something wrong with me. And then somebody else is going, oh, no, that thing doesn't work. That thing is a piece of crap. No. And then other people are saying, but wait, I think it's going to start working soon. Let's hang in there. Or somebody's saying, I don't even know what I've been doing with my life. Like, this is crazy. I don't know what to trust. I don't know I was a writer and now ChatGPT can write for me. Like, you have to have friendliness in this. You have to have a community. It's so important. So be talking to people. Don't be trying to navigate this all by yourself. This is a community effort.
I'm so glad you use those examples, because one of the things that comes up time and again is AI is great. It's doing all these great things for us, but it's going to remove all these jobs, especially in the social goods sector.
Yeah.
And so whether or not either of those things are really a factual statement,
Yeah.
what you just talked about how it kind of threatens our sense of self in a world that's constantly evolving. The things we learn to do might have to be done a little differently in the future.
Yeah.
That's something where by sharing, we might get comfortable with a deeply uncomfortable situation, because we're flowing down a river on an inner tube. Nobody told us where it's going. So at least we can have some fun on the ride if we're there with others. So it's a tough thing.
Interestingly, I think that this is part of the reason why so many women are engaged in the AI revolution, and who are learning the tools so quickly and have gone all in, because so we've taught 2,000 fundraisers how to use generative AI responsibly, and 95% of those are women. And I know that I probably draw an audience of more women than men's, but even if you control for that a little bit, still all of our events, women. I launched this thing called She Leads AI, because there are so many women who want to spend time together, who are leading in this. The special ingredient is empathy. This is a time when, how we've talked about for a couple of years, that empathy is the secret to good leadership. Now it's more true than ever. This is a time where every ounce of empathy that you can apply to any given circumstance is going to go a long way. People are going to feel isolated, like you said. People are going to be thinking that everyone's going to lose their jobs. Jobs are going to be lost and jobs are going to be created. It's going to be uncomfortable in the interim.
I can't thank you enough for all of this, Anne. Thank you. Again, we have all your contact data there. We did have a question from Mike talking about if ChatGPT does learn to use our voice, and you did talk about that a little bit earlier, and he might have missed that reference. That just to summarize, that there are ways that we can, through learning prompts the way you have, can learn to train a platform like that one to speak more with our voice. Is that a correct?
100%. Yes. So there's a methodology for analyzing your own. It will analyze your own writing or your brand in a super complicated sciencey kind of way. And once you use that, once you have that, you will tell ChatGPT, write this piece of content. You'll tell it what you want, and you'll say, using this, I call it a universal voice prompt. It's your universal voice prompt. I've got one for boring emails, fun emails.
Why boring emails? Why does anybody need that?
Man, writing boring emails is so soul-sucking. So I have it describe what that voice, like the State Department kind of voice. But yeah, you absolutely can. You absolutely can. So, and you could totally DM me and I'll give you my voice prompt.
Great. And again, for those who might have missed it in passing, you're talking about this stuff every week with folks. So it may not be as specific next Friday as how to make GPT-4 speak like me, but having that community is going to be very important to all of us. So thank you for everything here today, Anne, and for the sharing you've done in the past here. Thank you to everybody who's been hanging out with us live. For those who are catching this as a recording, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Maybe most importantly, I hope you'll take that example and then dive in with a colleague and then with a few others, so that you are not alone, not because it's necessarily scary to you. It may be, it may not, but because we're all better when we work together. So, so thank you to you. And I hope you'll join us again on Thursday when we have another session coming up. In fact, we have 46 weeks this year. We'll have 2 sessions per week in addition to the podcast. So do check all that out. We would love you to be there. You can check out all those sessions and our entire calendar at DonorSearch.net under the resources tab. But please fill out the survey when we end today. Okay. So we'll know what you want to see in here. Until next time. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Jay.